Hi everybody, this is Rubis, and today we're going to talk about some Scratch basics. And what I mean by that is when you open Scratch for the first time, what all these things mean, and what can you do with them. So the first thing you'll see is this big area here. This is what's referred to, actually this whole area is referred to as the backpack. I like to think of these as different like pockets. I don't know, different metaphors work better for different people. So this area is the backpack pretty much. This area is the stage, not this thing. This is a sprite. So this area that it's on, here, let me label it for you. Stage. So this area that I'm editing right now, this is the stage. So you can click on here and edit the stage. That's the background. You can edit some code for the stage, but I'll talk about that probably in a different video. These things here, there's only one thing here. This is the default thing. This is called a sprite. Now, the sprites are like kind of like players in your game, pretty much. You can program them to do different things, to talk, to walk, to make different sounds. So you can program sprites to do all sorts of different things. To add more sprites, you can click here, where you can either click here and choose a sprite, or click here and paint a new one. Or you can pick a random sprite, which is like this. Is it always a present? No. Okay, yeah. So you can, if you click here, it's a surprise sprite, or you can upload your own sprite. If you get like a sprite from, if you download a sprite from somewhere, or you just find a sprite from somewhere else. So I'm going to delete these two sprites and just leave this cat. Okay. Now there are a few things here that actually, let me get another sprite. So if you click on each sprite, you'll see the positions are different. This is the X position and this is the Y position. If I click on the bat, I will see that the X and the Y position are different than they are for the cat. I can also name the sprites by clicking here and saying like cat. I can show or hide the sprite using these two buttons. This button, this field changes the size. If I turn it to 50, this is like 50 size. If I turn it to 200, that's a much bigger size. So 100 is the default. The direction is which direction it's facing. If you click here, you can change it. So this is, you can point in the direction that you want it to. I'm going to leave it at 90 for now. And yeah, so I'm going to delete the bat really quick so it's not confusing. So when you click on the cat, you'll see these things over here. Most of these things are pretty self-explanatory. And what I mean by that is if you click on them, they will kind of do what they do. So if I click on move 10 steps, if you look at the cat, it's moving 10 steps. If I click turn, if I drag this, so this is called a drag and drop language. So if I click here and I click this, see it's rotating. Perfect. You can go to certain coordinates, go to a random position, all sorts of things. This is the motion tab. For all the things in the motion tab, they have to do with where your sprite is on the stage. If we go to looks, this is where you can make your cat or whatever say hello, or change costumes. So if I click on the costumes tab, and let's say I just quickly add an amazing purple hat. Look at this. Oof, beautiful. I am not an artist by any means. This is his hat. So if I click here, it'll switch to costume 1, or it can switch to costume 2. And you can add as many costumes as you want if you choose a different costume here. So that's pretty much what the looks do. You can also change size or change the color. So if you look at the cat now, I'm changing the color. Yeah. Anyway, that is what this looks tab mostly does. The sound, again, is pretty self-explanatory. So if I, and the best part about Scratch is if you drag something out and you want to see what it does, you can just double click on it, or just single click, and it will do it. So if you hear that, you can hear that the cat is meowing. And you can change the volume, and you can clear sound effects, you can set the pitch, all these different things. And if you're curious about any of these things, I encourage you to take them out and click on them. Yeah, because that will show you what they do. Okay, the Events tab is where the programming logic starts. These things are all, notice how you can't put anything above them. See, they only have a connecting piece on the bottom. So if I put here, I can see if I drag it close to it, I can connect it. If I click the green button, so when the green button is clicked, it plays a meow sound. Alternatively, when the space key or any other key is pressed, the things underneath happen. When this sprite is clicked, when the backdrop changes, which is like the stage costume, pretty much. When the loudness, so it can actually sense your microphone. When I receive messages are complicated, so I will cover that in a separate video, but basically you can broadcast a message and do something when it receives a message. So one sprite can tell something to another sprite, for example. That's the Events tab. If we go to the Control tab, this is more about, if you know about programming, it's called control flow. And what this means is it affects the flow of the code. So if I do a little quick demonstration, right? So if I put these things here, right? So when I click the green button, it's going to wait 1 second and then play the sound. 1. There you go. Alternatively, you can have if statements, if-else statements, wait statements. These are all things I will probably cover in a separate video, specifically about what control means, because control flow is one of the most important things in computer science. Next thing is sensing. So these are things that you would put in here. So I'm going to do a little quick demonstration. And something I really like about Scratch is you can really see what is actually happening. So this is called a forever loop. At the bottom of the forever loop, there's no piece, because if I try and connect something, I can't actually connect it. It goes inside the loop, because nothing happens after this forever loop, because it's forever going to be doing the thing that's inside the loop. So if I go to sound effect, so now what is this code going to do? So when I click this, it's always going to be checking if it's touching the mouse pointer. So if I move my mouse pointer on top of it, it will continue to meow until I move it off of it. On top, off of it. So this is kind of how the sensing blocks work. They can also check if you're touching a certain color. For example, here we go. If it's touching the color of the stage. Let's say I move it here. But if I move it off, I move it here. I move it off. See? Isn't that interesting? Another thing is key pressed. Now this is often used when you want to do movement. So if you want to, so if the space key is pressed, let's go to motion, and I'm going to move 10 steps. So if I press space, 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 see, it just moves forward. Space, cool. Where was I? I was in sensing. Yeah, there are some other things like mouse coordinates, draggable or non-draggable, loudness again, timers, all sorts of things. And I will cover these things in different projects throughout my series. But this is just a general overview. So I really encourage you to check each of these things out if you're interested. And I really encourage you to play around, because that's how you learn. Let's go to operators. Operators, this is pretty self-explanatory, this first part at least. This is simple like math, like plus, like this, you put something in here, so you could do like 3 plus 4. If I click on it, it'll tell me 7. It can pick a random number. It's subtraction, multiplication, division, pick a random number, checking if things are greater than or less than or equal to. These things are AND, or, and not blocks. So these can all be used in programming logic. So if, let's go get an if statement. So forever if, let's use all the things we've learned so far. Let's go to sensing. Mouse X is less than 50. We're going to make the meow noise. Okay, because the X coordinate of the mouse is less than 50. If I move the X coordinate, now it's not. See, so it's always checking the coordinate of the mouse, and if it moves less than 50, it meows. Isn't that cool? Where was I? Operators. That's what the less than thing does. So let's do the same thing. Let's say if the mouse is not less than 50, then we can also make it meow. So right now mouse is less than 50. If I move it over 50, it will start meowing, as you can tell. And I move it less than 50, more than 50, less than 50, more than 50. Interesting, right? So that's most of operators. Sets are a little more complicated, so I will deal with this in a separate video. There's also complex math like modulos and cosines, sines, all of these things, rounding, all sorts of things from math. Now the last tab, or the second to last tab, sorry, is the variables. Now a variable is like a box that stores a value. So let's say that when I click this, I want to set my variable to 0. I'm going to click this box so that I can see my variable at the top. And let's go to control, get a forever loop, and an if statement. So if, let's see. So I guess if touching mouse pointer, and we're going to go to events, control, we're going to wait 1 second, and then change my value to 1 by 1, and then wait 1 second. So let's look what this does. So you can see the score is 0 right now, and if I touch it, it changes by 1, or 2, and 3, and 4, and 5 every second. So if I move it away, it's not going to change. If I touch it, it goes to 7. And if I click this go arrow again, it's going to go back to 0, and it will start at 1, 2, 3, 4, and etc. So that's what the variables do. You can create more variables. You can create lists of variables. Lists of items. And yeah, lists are a little more complicated. I'll go over that in a separate video. And finally, we can make blocks. Now, making blocks is an advanced topic that I will cover in a separate video, but I'll just tell you that if you know anything about programming, it's equivalent to a function. If that means nothing to you, don't worry about it. I will cover it in a separate video, but it pretty much is the same thing as this, but it lets you make repeatable code. So let's call it test. Okay. So I'm going to put test in my. So if I ever touch the mouse pointer, let's just keep this simple. I'm going to do test. Now test is going to change my variable by 1 and wait 1 second. So it's the same thing as before, but our code is in a separate place. So you can just, instead of having all this code, let's say we do test multiple times, if I'm touching it, it will just repeat this code instead of having to duplicate, oops, that's not what I wanted to do, instead of having to duplicate the code twice. See? So instead of doing this, which is so much code, we can just do this, which is like keeps things more organized. Now, again, this is just the very basics to get you started with Scratch, but I hope this triggers your interest, and I hope that you play around and learn new things on your own. If you enjoy this video, make sure to like it and subscribe for more similar videos. Alrighty, bye!